your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us. The Alberta Legislature passed the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act in the early hours on Thursday. The final vote was 27-7. The act strips out sweeping powers for Cabinet, but will allow Alberta to push back on federal laws or policies that negatively impact the province. It will address federal legislation and policies that are unconstitutional, violate Albertans' charter rights, or that interfere with provincial constitutional rights. Premier Danielle Smith says her government has to prevent federal intrusion.
Our province will not enforce unconstitutional or harmful Ottawa policies or laws in Alberta. Albertans come first, always. Importantly, this act fully respects Indigenous and treaty rights, the Constitution, court decisions, and does not force private citizens or companies to do anything contrary to federal law or policy. It's intended to be fully democratic and transparent. Each proposed use of the act will require a special motion to be passed in the Legislative Assembly, which will be subject to open discussion, examination, and review.
Smith adds that the Alberta Sovereignty Act will not allow Alberta to defy Canada's constitution or allow Alberta to separate from Canada. Bill 1 will also not allow Cabinet to issue unconstitutional orders in council or give instructions to people or corporations that are not provincial entities to violate federal law. Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley is not impressed with the United Conservative Party passing the Alberta Sovereignty Act. She says this new legislation overwrites the Canadian Constitution, which is not good for Albertans.
This can only possibly create chaos and uncertainty. And it's a terrible signal to investors that they cannot rely on the rule of law or the application of due process if they invest their money in Alberta. Rather, they will be subject to the whims of a premier with a record of extremist views and dishonesty. We cannot afford to let Smith's job-killing Sovereignty Act inject chaos into our province because it will hurt our economy.
Notley says if her party forms government next May, she will repeal the legislation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also commented on the Alberta passing of the Sovereignty Act. Trudeau says his government will continue to focus on being there for Albertans.
We're going to stay focused on working hard for Albertans, delivering on job growth, delivering on support for people who need it with things like childcare, with things like the dental care and rental benefits. We're not going to get into arguing about something that obviously is the Alberta government trying to push back at the federal government. We're going to continue to work as constructively as possible. That's what Albertans want. They want governments that deliver for them, and we're focused on that.
Now, many may be wondering, what is the necessity behind having a Sovereignty Act? In a recent press conference, Premier Smith said she wants to create a legal framework protecting Alberta where the province is shielded, and it will be upon the federal government to prove their case before the courts instead of Alberta fighting for its constitutional rights.
Ultimately, these things will get battled out in the court. I mean, part of the issue when we say we're putting this up as a shield is that Ottawa invades our jurisdiction, passes legislation, and then forces us to go to court to get our rights back. So what we are doing is putting up a shield saying, no, we're going to protect our constitutional jurisdiction, and then they can take us to court and try to argue why it is that they should violate the Constitution and invade our areas of sovereign power. I think that we all recognize that the courts are ultimately the arbiter of these kinds of things, and we're just reversing the onus. So I would imagine that that's how it would proceed.
Switching gears now, the UCP government introduced legislation on Thursday aimed at making police forces more accountable and responsive to the communities that they serve. Public Safety and Emergency Services Minister Mike Ellis announced the proposed Police Amendment Act, which would establish an independent agency called the Police Review Commission to review complaints, carry out investigations, and conduct disciplinary hearings to do away with the idea of police investigating police.
The Police Review Commission will not only boost public confidence by being independent but by creating a single agency to receive, investigate, and adjudicate complaints. We're also making it easier for Albertans to access the process, stay updated on progress of their case, and resolve their matters more quickly.
Coming up after the break, more news from around the province, including renewed calls for mask mandates to return to schools. Several pediatricians within the Alberta Medical Association are calling for stronger public health measures as children's hospitals feel the strain of several respiratory issues. Dr. Thaysheen Lada says she and her colleagues want the province to provide more public information about the safety of flu and COVID-19 vaccines. They also want to bring in temporary school mask mandates and make vaccines more accessible. Members of the pediatric section of the AMA, which represents over 300 physicians, sent a letter to Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Mark Joffe, on Wednesday, calling for the stronger health measures to give overwhelmed hospitals a chance to recover. The letter was also shared with Health Minister Jason Copping, Education Minister Adriana LaGrange, and school board chairs. A National Flu Watch website by Health Canada shows influenza is widespread in much of Alberta, and doctors say hospitalizations for respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, are also high in the province. The province says it has secured 5 million bottles of children's acetaminophen and ibuprofen to combat the shortage of children's pain and fever medicine. The shipment will be arriving from Atabay Pharmaceuticals and Fine Chemicals very soon. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says the medication was desperately needed, with children's hospitals being overwhelmed, along with cold and flu season upon us.
We want to make sure parents have access to the medication that they need, because if they can't break the fever, they end up in the hospital rooms. And that is what's causing the pressure on our hospitals, not here, but across the entire country. So I think that our job in providing health services is to make sure that people have the medication that they need so they can treat at home, and also make sure that the hospitals are able to deal with patients efficiently when they show up, so that they're not waiting for hours with a lot of distress and worry. So that's how we're being proactive.
Alberta's 2 deputy chief medical officers of health are leaving. This is less than a month after Dr. Dina Hinshaw was removed as our province's top doctor. She was replaced by Dr. Mark Joffe. The UCP says Dr. Rosanna Salvatera and Dr. Jing Hu have given notice. Hinshaw, who became the face of Alberta's public health response due to the COVID-19 pandemic, was replaced earlier this fall. Premier Danielle Smith blamed Hinshaw and AHS for failing to deliver the best advice and care for Albertans as the hospital system came close to buckling during the pandemic. There are those in certain Indigenous communities who are quite concerned with the Liberals' gun ban bill C-21. Melissa Imbarki is a policy analyst with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. She is also First Nations. She says taking away hunting rifles from Indigenous people would be a direct violation of treaty rights.
It started off as banning handguns, and that's what was sold to Canadians. How and where and when did hunting rifles get included in this equation? And by doing so, you're basically going against our treaty rights to be able to hunt. What else are we supposed to use? We rely on wild meat because the food prices are so high. For some communities, this is their food. This is what they eat during the winter. So essentially, you're taking away our food source without even consulting us, and that is just wrong on so many levels.
The Alberta government introduced legislation to implement inflation-fighting rebates and payouts on Wednesday. Affordability Minister Matt Jones says the changes allow help for families, seniors, and the vulnerable soon. Middle to lower class income families, those with a household income of less than $180,000 per year, are to get $600 over 6 months for each child under the age of 18. The same income threshold and benefit applies to seniors, and the payout will go to disability supports. Alberta NDP finance critic Shannon Phillips blasted the legislation, saying it does not benefit all Albertans.
This package of initiatives leaves out 2 million Albertans. So there are a number of people that have simply not been considered by the UCP government, once again pointing to their lack of competence, professionalism, and indeed their lack of consultation or real understanding of their actions and how they have an effect on ordinary people in their everyday lives.
The total cost of the package is pegged at $2.8 billion. Residents in Medicine Hat got a chance to see the CP holiday train up close and personal late Wednesday afternoon. CP has 2 holiday trains which travel across both Canada and the U.S., collecting donations in support of food banks. Well, coming up after the break, Hal Roberts and the Western Standard's Dave Naylor chat about the latest political stories from around Alberta. Stay tuned, that's next. Albertans have already been given the front row seat to the battle between the UCP and the NDP, and there seems to be no shortage of pre-election jabs. As Danielle Smith and the UCP continue on their path with the current sitting of the legislature, Albertans seem to have to pick a side. To talk more about the here and now of the Alberta political landscape is Western Standard News editor Dave Naylor.
Dave, the Western Standard recently featured the issue of land use in northern Alberta. What can you tell us about this federal issue?
The federal government is trying to create, I think it's close to 90 protected areas across large swaths of Canada, mainly sort of in the northern Arctic area. And they're sort of working with, in Alberta, around the Cold Lake area, working with Métis groups and trying to work with them to create these protected areas. But they don't seem to be consulting with individuals who are living there. Certainly not yet, anyways. And they seem to be doing it quietly, like sneaking up on everybody. The Alberta government, it was raised in the ledge. David Hansen, the MLA for the area, basically said, "No, nice try, Justin, but we're on to you now, and it's not going to work." So it's an issue that's really just breaking in the last couple of days. And I think once more and more people hear about it and learn about it, I think the anger is going to grow.
Dave, both the Western Standard and Bridge City News have chatted with Sheila Annette Lewis about her need for a transplant. What was your first reaction to hearing that she couldn't get a transplant due to her rejection of receiving an mRNA vaccine?
What a story, eh? What a heartbreaking story that this woman was rejected for an organ transplant. We can't say what kind of organ it was due to court orders, and every level of court has ruled against her. Interestingly, though, Danielle Smith, in her opening day press conference when the ledge opened, said she's looking for a doctor for a second opinion. So that there is a little bit of hope there. If another doctor comes in and says, "Oh no, she should be able to get it," then you're going to have a medical sort of dogfight on your hand, I would think, with doctors saying no and politicians saying yes, and who's going to end up the winner in that case? And there's only going to be one loser, and that's going to be poor Mrs. Lewis.
So from your point of view, do you think that the government should get involved in order to help save this woman's life?
You know what? I don't know if you ever want politics to rule over good medicine, but the unvaccinated did have a lot of unfair discriminations against them. So maybe it is worth looking at. The panic of the pandemic, so to speak, is over. Why don't we take a look at it with a sober second thought and bring in a second medical opinion and just to see what they say.
Dave, we've got a big provincial election coming up next May. The NDP seem to be acting like a government in waiting. And of course, the transition team now, you've got Danielle Smith and her new team trying to gain a lot of steam ahead of the election. Where do you think both parties stand right now? Who's got most of the momentum as we head into that provincial election?
Well, the Danielle Smith government is very new. But what they've done in their first month or so in power is they're trying to take away the NDP's platform. Right? Because of the surge in oil money, they've been able to hand out billions of dollars in the last month or so, just on inflation fighting measures. They've given money to food banks. They've given money to all sorts of organizations that help the poor. So the NDP are going to be left with just saying, well, okay, they've done that, but we're going to have to give them more. Whereas the UCP can just say, you can complain all you want. Here's the proof. We've acted on the concerns. I think a lot of the UCP election results will benefit or will come about what happens in the healthcare system. Danielle Smith has basically staked her reputation, saying she's going to clean house at AHS. She started that, got rid of the volunteer board of directors, installed a new chief medical officer of health, and they've set out a big, very ambitious 90-day plan to try and kickstart the system and get it operating more smoothly.
Up next, we hear from Martha Matherin-Moe, the Vice Provost for Equity, Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Lethbridge. She will share with us what the university is doing to help students feel safe and accepted. Stay with us. Tuesday of this week was the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. It commemorates the 33rd anniversary of the mass shooting in Montreal at École Polytechnique Engineering School, which saw 14 women lose their lives. Fortunately, according to Stats Canada, over the past 12 years, cases of domestic violence have been decreasing. Officials at the University of Lethbridge held a learning lunch on Tuesday, highlighting the need to learn what it takes so that everyone is safe and accepted. So Martha, tell me, do you see that there is a path forward away from domestic and gender-based violence?
That's a very interesting question. I think it's not something that one person can actually solve. I think it goes beyond that. I think it's about how we as a collective, a community, be it academic community, but also the broader community, can contribute to making sure that there is safety for everyone. And I think it really starts with the acknowledgement that it does happen, because a lot of these issues, gender-based violence, does not always get reported because of the fear of the stigma that goes with it. So I think the first piece is the acknowledgement of the existence and the collective responsibility to move the issues forward and address them.
Awesome. And what has been the response this week from the students as they learn about domestic and gender-based violence? What have they been saying after taking the training?
First of all, people, when you talk about it, they're not sure what it means. So I think there's a lot of education pieces that have to be done. But the piece I also think it's important that we are, as an institution, we are part of making the changes we want to see. And what we have done is we've implemented where students are required to take this training at the beginning of their programs, but also we as senior leaders are also going to be taking the training as well. So I think I wouldn't say there's been any pushback. I think people are just not clear about what it is and what it's not. And there's a lot of misinformation in the system. So I think it's about clarifying what it is and the intention and the impact we're working towards and how we engage people to be part of the conversation it's not about pushing one group against the other, but how do we bring everybody into the conversation so that we can collectively address it, would be my response to that.
Thank you. That was a great response. Now, would you say that this requires transformative change, maybe in the way people think not just about the subject, but about themselves as well?
I think there's transformative change, but I also think there is impact. Like, what do we want for when our students, no matter what their gender expression or their diversity of background, come into our campus? What do we want them to do? We want them to be safe. We want them to feel heard and included. And if that means we have to ensure that we do the work to create that environment and lead that as an institution, I think we can be good examples of change agents in the broader community. So it's a lot of work, and it's not something that you're going to have to fix. Like I keep going back to, we can't fix this by applying a one pill solution to it. Everybody has to do their part about it. It would require some self-reflection as well, but I think there has to be the commitment to do the work to disrupt it as well.
Now, we hear terms like community compassion and responsibility to take care of our neighbors. What about community and responsibility towards our fellow humans? Does that play a role?
I think it's about, at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We want to feel that not because I show up as a transgendered person or a person with a disability, because of my difference, that my life could be at risk. So I do believe it's a collective responsibility to be a human and see the value of our humanity. And I think it's about redirecting us to see that our differences are not negative. Our differences are opportunities for innovation and creativity and for engagement. So wouldn't we want to be in a world where no matter what I look like or the position that I come from, I can feel safe to be authentically myself?
Do you think that through this training that your students are encountering inner work for the first time?
We talk about it a lot in academia about learning, relearning, and unlearning. I think we all have to do that inner work. And it's not just about the students. I think students, our faculty, our staff, and our leaders have to always have a reflexive approach in how they view their life, their work. So I do think, and I think that's an uncomfortable space for some people, like to do because you have to challenge some of your own ingrained beliefs and ideologies, and nobody wants to feel like they're a bad person, which is not what this is about. It's about really giving us an opportunity to really rethink and unlearn and disrupt our own personal biases about things that are different that we don't understand.
Stay tuned after the break for a look back at the stories that made headlines earlier this week. Keep it right here. The city of Lethbridge says 454 people are experiencing homelessness here in our city. That is according to the 2022 point-in-time count survey. Point-in-time counts are done every 2 years, and since the last report, the numbers have doubled. A city official explains why that is.
The main increase comes from the number of unsheltered individuals. In terms of the sheltered count, we're seeing similar number of people from 2018, 2021, and 2022. In terms of what we're seeing in terms of our service providers, this number wasn't totally unexpected. This was kind of what we had heard in the community, so the numbers we received align with what we know from the service providers working with these individuals.
The city says they were not surprised by the increase. Of the 454 people who are experiencing homelessness, about 52% are unsheltered. Hand-knitted winter clothing is very much needed this time of year. Volunteers from the Friends of the Chinook Regional Hospital's Craft Club hosted a fundraiser to showcase their wares. The funds raised will go directly back into the hospital. BCN's Micah Quinn explains.
The Craft Club has been going on for 30 plus years.
Nettie Hildebrand has been volunteering and managing the Friends of Chinook Regional Hospital's Craft Club for the past 22 years. She says all of the items for the fundraiser are hand knitted by volunteers and then brought into the hospital to sell.
The money that we make all goes back to support patient care in the hospital. It stays in Lethbridge. We always hope that we'll make somebody's day a bit brighter and warmer if they get a nice toque and pair of mittens when it's minus 25 below.
The group also donates their work to patients at the hospital, as well as Lethbridge Family Services. Colin Zieber, the Senior Operating Officer with Alberta Health Services, says the group holds a special place in his heart.
We have 4 children. Our oldest daughters are 20 years old, and we bought some clothes for their dolls here probably 19 years ago. And they're still in the toy box.
The fundraiser has generated over $69,000 to support the hospital, along with more than $102,000 sold through items in the gift shop.
It's $170,000 has been raised for the hospital here. I mean, the partnership of our Friends of the Hospital group, craft sales, foundation provide equipment and supplies for our health teams and also provide education as well.
The craft sale will run all day Wednesday and Thursday. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
$10,000 has been given to the University of Lethbridge to support the Pronghorns golf team. The donation will go towards helping the team travel south of the border for tournaments.
We hear all the time throughout the season about other teams being able to go and experience that. And for us being, you know, the U of L, Little Lethbridge, Southern Alberta, being able to go and experience that level of golf is going to exceed our expectations completely. I think it's just huge for us, especially like speaking for the women's golf team. We don't have that many girls on the team. We're slowly building our team members, which is wonderful. But just being able to bring recognition to the game of golf and to the U of L is nothing we could have ever asked for.
Head coach of the golf team, Marcus Meneghetti, says a lot of the program's funding happens internally, so this donation is a great way to help them expand their program.
We've definitely had some big contributions in the past, but nothing like this, and we're really excited for the opportunities it's going to give us. Golf's an expensive sport, even when you're competing at the university levels.
The donation was given by Paradise Canyon and the team of Ron Sakamoto, Matt Barkway, and Jay Maygard. More than 7,000 Albertans are being honored for their outstanding community achievements with the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal. You can include former Blood Tribe Chief and current University of Lethbridge Chancellor Charles Weaselhead in that group. Weaselhead, who is a residential school survivor, has spent much of his life promoting health, education, and economic development for Indigenous people. He appreciated receiving the award.
My background is pretty diversified, going from health to politics to education to working with different communities, both municipalities, working with the provincial and federal government. But definitely, I'm very pleased on a personal note. But I'm also very, very pleased, you know, that I'm a member of a larger community, the Blood Tribe, you know. And so I think it really speaks volumes about where I come from.
We have more coming up after the break. Next, we hear from a local author who has written her first murder mystery. Stay tuned.